Why did Darth Plagueis believe that Maul was not a real Sith? Greetings again, students of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. At one of the very brief moments in time, the rule of two was technically broken. Sidious took Maul and had him trained as a Sith assassin. For the next 20 years, Maul was being trained in Sith combat in secret. During this period, Darth Plagueis was still very much the reigning Dark Lord, and was very much alive. He had only witnessed a training hologram of Maul before though, but was impressed with what Sidious had crafted. However, Plagueis was completely unconcerned with his apprentice's new protege. As he observed the Zabrak in action, he would make a side comment invalidating Maul as an actual Dark Lord of the Sith. Of course, Sidious kept Maul's true purpose hidden from his master, and it was actually a stroke of genius to allow Plagueis to believe that Maul was not an actual apprentice. In today's holocron, we are going to review Plagueis' full reaction to seeing Maul for the first time in the book, and look into why Plagueis said that he was a false Sith Lord. Our story begins on Coruscant very shortly following the Battle of Naboo and the Naboo Crisis. It has been 20 years since Sidious has acquired Maul as an infant on Dathomir, and in that same year, Plagueis had an attempt made on his life by assassins. This left Plagueis reliant on a breathing mask and a voice vocabulator to help his severed vocal cords. Sidious had been training Maul in secret ever since finding him, but he had decided to actually show Plagueis his new apprentice, rather than continue to keep him a secret. This is a very interesting strategic move on Sidious's behalf, as most Rule of Two Sith, if they decide to train a protege and apprentice before killing their master, they will do so in complete secrecy to avoid any suspicion. But Sidious decides to just openly show Plagueis the project that he's been working on, taking a holo recording of Maul training with combat droids to his master. In that recording, we see Maul at his very best, moving around with the speed and ferocity befitting of the Sith. Plagueis watches on, looking intently at the recording, taking in every minute detail. The first thing that Plagueis says is that he has made Maul fearsome. The apprentice replies that he is fearless and even more capable against living creatures. Surprised, Plagueis looks over his shoulder at Sidious questioningly, asking him if he has fought Maul in a serious way before, one-on-one. Palpatine goes on to explain that he has stranded Maul on Hypori before for a month with no food, and with only a horde of assassin droids as company. Sidious would then return to Hypori to goad and challenge his apprentice, remarking that all things considered, Maul had fought very well even after Sidious had deprived him of his weapon. Plagueis noted that rather than punish Maul for his disobedience, Sidious chose to praise his resolve instead. In response, Sidious mentioned that he had always humbled him, so he chose at that moment to leave Maul's honor intact. This is one of the rare instances where we actually get a peek into Sidious's training style with Maul, where he chose to harshly punish mistakes but also praise victory. The discipline and spoil method kept Maul subservient to the Dark Lord, but at the cost of making him arrogant, which was something that Plagueis even mentioned. This is how the conversation continues. Sidious says, "He was already humbled. I chose to leave his honor intact. I proclaimed him my Myrmidon, the embodiment of a violent half of our partnership." Partnership? Plagueis repeated harshly. His and mine, not ours, Sidious amends. Plagueis then responds, "Regardless, you have allowed him to believe that he is more skilled than he actually is." There are several things to note here. Plagueis is incredibly suspicious that Sidious mentions including Maul in their partnership, and Palpatine's attempt to address the accusation right then and there, referring to his own partnership with Maul, with Plagueis not being involved. Plagueis then predicts that Sidious's praise of him has made him arrogant, which will be his downfall. And of course, Plagueis the Wise was correct. Later in the novel, Sidious realizes that his master was correct after doing a mission brief with Maul. The Zabrak warrior almost let his Jedi prey escape, which could have been detrimental to the Sith plan. And as we know, it's Maul's arrogance in this first battle with Kenobi that leaves him open to becoming sliced in half, something Plagueis had predicted from the very start, when looking at one holo recording of the man. The two continue to watch Maul's recording, and the conversation evolves to his appearance, his strange tattoos, until they are interrupted when Maul ignites his second lightsaber into the recording. The reveal of the weapon shocks Plagueis immensely, as Maul is revealed to have constructed a saber staff, the same weapon wielded by the Sith Exar Kun. This was a very traditional Sith weapon, one which hadn't been seen in a very long time, and this indicates that perhaps the Rule of Two Sith hadn't actually used a saber staff since Darth Zana. The double-bladed lightsaber is little else than a pure attack weapon, Only those who anticipate frequent combat will wield it, as it is deadly to the point of savagery, and it is known to kill very quickly. No Rule of Two Sith would need such a weapon unless it was for personal preference, as they shouldn't expect to battle with it very often at all. This is what shocked Plagueis, and further proved to him that Maul wasn't in actuality a real apprentice of the Bainite lineage. He goes on to make a despairing comment about Maul not being a real Sith. Plagueis watched as droid after droid was impaled on the opposing Crimson Blades. It strikes me as unnecessary, but I won't deny his master of the Jar-Kai technique. Again, he turns to Sidious. Nyman and Teräs Käse will never substitute for Dun Mok, but I appreciate that you have trained him to be a fighting machine, rather than a true apprentice. What Plagueis is saying is that Sidious trained him to be a traditional warrior, to harken back to a version of the Sith that no longer existed. Nyman was the root of Jar-Kai, the system of using 2 or more lightsabers. Jar-Kai is usually either used by a dual saber wielder or a saber staff. Teräs Käse is a martial art that allowed non-Force sensitives to become lethal to those that could touch the Force. But when a trained Force sensitive learned that same art, they became inhumanly deadly. Masters of the art used extremely quick and devastating physical strikes, with many of the moves being so fast that the artist appears to be a blur of speed. Teräs Käse actually translated to steel hands in Basic, referring to the extreme toughness of practitioners' fists, which were said to punch with the same force as a bullet from a slug thrower. Maul mastered this art in tandem with his lightsaber to become the perfect assassin of a new Sith era, capable of defeating Jedi opponents, even if he were disarmed. However, while both of these styles were useful for a warrior, Plagueis believed that they paled in comparison to the usefulness of Dun Mok. Dun Mok was the weapon of the more refined Sith. Dun Mok was a system of combat that lay outside the realm of the lightsaber, outside of technique of the blade. It was a technique of the mind, the Sith attempting to break their enemy's will, their concentration. This was done commonly through spoken taunts, jeers, and jests, highlighting your enemy's inner weakness that lay just beneath the surface, which had the end result of eroding one's will. Mental attacks would also be utilized during combat in order to strip one's concentration, making an opponent less precise and less effective. This was a deadly tool, deadly against Jedi. If employed to maximum effectiveness, it had the capability of cutting an opponent off from the Force momentarily. The reason for Plagueis' praise of Dun Mok as a modern Sith technique was because it was useful both in and outside of combat. Plagueis and Sidious had been using the technique in common conversation for years, dominating opponents politically and financially if need be. It was perfect for the Rule of Two Sith. Put simply, Plagueis was commenting that Maul had truly only been trained to fight and kill. He was an assassin, he was impressive, but nothing more. He could see that Maul was not being trained as a true Sith in the succession of the Rule of Two. Maul was meant to be a tool. Of course, this was only half true. In reality, Sidious was only training Maul to be a tool, but at the same time, he did consider him a legitimate Sith apprentice of the Bainite lineage, and Palpatine had a stroke of genius by allowing his master to think otherwise. This way, Plagueis never suspected that Sidious was preparing his own resources to take his position. He would present Maul as little more than an assassin for the two of them to use and then dispose. He had kept Maul his secret, one that would give him credence to any suspicions that Plagueis had. But as candid as Sidious was, he had his intentions in plain sight before his master. He knew that this was the best way to manipulate him. This is how the Sith of the Rule of Two operate. They deal with secrecy and subterfuge, even among one another. But anyway, friends, that is why Darth Plagueis thought that Maul was a fake Sith, and how he actually predicted his defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. But anyway, friends, we would love to hear what you think. In your opinion, is Darth Maul a legitimate Sith Lord of the Rule of Two lineage? As always, if you enjoyed this video, it would help us out immensely if you could leave a like, and as always, may the Force be with you.